She smiled, then shoved me hard over the railing. The sea swallowed me whole. One second I was sipping champagne, the next I was fighting for air in the Atlantic. My own son just watched. No panic. No help, just silence. My suitcase? Gone. My name? Erased. But why? How did I go from beloved mother to disposable liability in a matter of hours? And what exactly did they plan to do with the $3 billion once I was gone? If you think this is just another one of those bedtime stories, think again, because I came back. And I didn't come back empty-handed. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. I always believed that family meant something, that no matter how cruel the world became, the people you raised, the ones who shared your name, your home, your table, would stand by you when it mattered most. But I learned, far too late, that love doesn't always run in the blood. Sometimes it runs straight into a cold Atlantic current, dragged down by betrayal and greed. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 72 years old, though some mornings I feel closer to 100. I spent most of my adult life standing beside one man, Thomas Whitmore, the brilliant, stubborn founder of Whitmore Technologies, and the only man who ever made me laugh until I cried. When he passed away in 2020, he left me everything: his fortune, his legacy, his secrets, and, apparently, a family full of snakes. It was a Tuesday morning in June, warm and golden, one of those rare Massachusetts days where the sun actually bothers to show up. My son Michael had called me the night before, his voice a shade too cheerful. "Mom, Samantha and I want to take you out on the yacht. Just a little celebration. You've been doing so well since the surgery. It's time we had a day together. Just us." I should have known. Michael never called without an agenda, and certainly not without going through his assistant first. But I'd been recovering from hip replacement for 6 weeks. I was tired of the condo's silence, tired of reading the same emails over and over, wondering if I'd imagined the coldness in my son's replies. So, I said yes. I wore my navy blue dress, the one Thomas always said brought out my eyes. I called for a taxi, not trusting my still sore leg to drive me to the marina. The sun shimmered off the water like diamonds as I arrived, and there was Michael, waiting at the dock like a golden boy in a tailored shirt. Behind him, Samantha stood on the yacht's deck, holding 2 champagne flutes and smiling like a woman with a winning hand. "The boat's beautiful," I said as I boarded. And it was. 42 feet of slick, sea-ready indulgence. Michael kissed my cheek. "We're thinking of taking her to the Caribbean next month. Thought we'd give her a spin first with you." The first hour was almost perfect. We drifted past the Boston skyline, then out into open water, the world narrowing to blue and salt and sky. Samantha poured mimosas, chatted about renovations, my old house. Now theirs and I tried to forget the hollow ache behind her words. It wasn't until Michael refilled my glass and asked about my will that my skin prickled with alarm. "Just curious, Mom. Probate can be such a mess, especially with big estates. Have you ever considered simplifying things? For us?" That's when I noticed Samantha's phone, tilted slightly, camera lens catching me mid-sip. And that's when it clicked: the friendly cruise, the subtle filming, the talk of wills. This wasn't a celebration. This was a setup. "I'd like to go back to shore now," I said, setting my glass aside. Michael's voice changed, no longer soft. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen." The world slowed. Samantha stepped closer, voice syrupy with concern. "You've been forgetful lately, Eleanor. The doctors agree. We've documented everything. We're just trying to help you before you hurt yourself or someone else." It was a performance. A well-rehearsed lie. They'd fabricated symptoms, switched prescriptions, coached me into confusion, and filmed the evidence. The power of attorney papers they'd pushed during my hospital stay? I thought they were helping. I was wrong. "What happens if I don't sign anything?" I asked. Samantha leaned in, her whisper as sharp as broken glass. "Well, an elderly woman. Post-surgery. Dizzy from pain meds. Who's to say she didn't fall? These things happen. Accidents. Tragic. Really." I stood, trembling but resolute. "You won't get away with this." Michael's eyes met mine, cold and unfamiliar. "We already have." Then, just like that, Samantha gave me a gentle nudge. Not violent, just enough to throw off my balance. 1 second, I was standing. The next, I was airborne free-falling in stunned silence until the ocean swallowed me whole. The cold was immediate and brutal. It slammed into my lungs, stole my breath, dragged me down. My dress, soaked and heavy, pulled at my limbs. But I fought. I kicked off my shoes, reached for the surface, gasping as my head broke through the waves. Above me, the yacht turned away. They were leaving me to die. And that should have been the end of my story. A tragedy, a headline, a cautionary tale for the wealthy and alone. But fate, it turns out, had other plans. Because floating somewhere between life and death, salt stinging my eyes and lungs screaming for air, I spotted a speck on the horizon. A boat. A chance. And I wasn't done yet. The cold gripped me like a fist, but I kept paddling. My limbs moved on memory, not strength. My mind, sharper than ever, despite the pain, screamed one word over and over: survive. And then I heard it, a faint rumble, like thunder far off. I turned my head and saw the fishing boat weathered, low in the water, and blessedly close. It wasn't much to look at, but to me, it was salvation. A man stood at the bow, squinting into the sun. Then he shouted something could have been a curse, could have been a prayer. Moments later, I felt strong arms lifting me from the Atlantic and into a world that smelled of diesel, salt, and fish guts. It was glorious. "Holy hell, lady," the man said. "What happened to you?" I couldn't answer right away. I was shivering so hard my teeth clicked like castanets. He wrapped me in a thick blanket, rough and damp, but warm enough to keep me from slipping away. Another voice, this one younger. "Grandpa, we need to get her warm. I think she's in shock." They got me below deck, handed me a mug of something hot, instant coffee, I think spiked with something stronger. I drank. I breathed. I lived. "My name's Henry," the older man said. "This here's Ethan, my grandson. We were out checking lobster traps. Good thing, too." "Eleanor," I rasped. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore." Henry blinked. "Whitmore? As in?" "Yes, that Whitmore." I saw the shift in his expression. Recognition. A mix of awe and discomfort. Everyone in Massachusetts knew the Whitmore name. My husband's company had been a cornerstone of Boston's tech scene for decades. But few people knew much about me, and I intended to keep it that way. "You mind telling me what the hell you were doing, swimming in the Atlantic in a navy dress?" I looked at him. Hard. My son and daughter-in-law tried to kill me. Ethan made a choking sound. Henry didn't flinch. "That's a lot," he said slowly. "You sure?" I nodded. "They pushed me off a yacht, left me to drown, then sailed away." Henry whistled low. "You got somewhere safe to go?" "No," I said, and then I hesitated. "But I need to disappear, at least for a while. Can you help me?" Ethan looked at his grandfather, uncertain. Henry studied me, then gave a single, slow nod. "I've seen enough of the world to know when someone's telling the truth. Yeah, we'll help you." They brought me to a small inlet near Gloucester, a place only locals knew. We docked beside a ramshackle pier that led to a cozy bed and breakfast tucked beneath wind-bent pine trees. The kind of place that didn't ask questions. Mrs. Linda Chen answered the door. She was about my age, short, steel-haired, with the no-nonsense air of someone who had seen everything and been impressed by none of it. She didn't blink when she saw me wrapped in a fishing blanket, barefoot and soaking wet. "Trouble?" she asked Henry. "The kind that needs a warm bed and no paperwork. Room 3's empty. Soup's on the stove." And just like that, I vanished. Over the next 2 days, I healed physically, anyway. The bruises on my body faded faster than the ones inside. Henry brought me newspapers. Ethan brought me questions. Linda brought me strength. It was in that quiet sanctuary that I began to understand the depth of the betrayal. The news reports were already circulating. Eleanor Whitmore, widow of tech mogul Thomas Whitmore, presumed drowned in tragic boating accident. My obituary was tasteful, a few lies sprinkled in early signs of cognitive decline, concerns expressed by her loving family. Loving family. The words made me want to laugh and scream all at once. But the worst part wasn't the article. It was the photo. Me, sitting at Michael's birthday party last year, eyes glassy, holding a cocktail I never ordered. I remember the moment well. They hadn't told me it was a surprise party. I'd arrived expecting dinner and was greeted by 20 strangers in my old house. My house, which I'd signed over to them because I thought it would make things easier. I was confused. I'd had a headache. And now that moment had become part of their evidence that I was slipping. It was brilliant, diabolical, and it meant they'd been planning this for a long time. I needed help. Not just a safe place, I needed someone who could get inside their world and pull it apart. That's when Linda introduced me to Danny Crawford. He looked like trouble-graying hair, leather jacket, eyes like broken glass. But he listened. Really listened. I told him everything. The yacht, the push, the false concern, the recording, the power of attorney I'd signed in the hospital, believing it was for bill payments. I used to work white-collar crime for the FBI, he said when I finished. Got tired of watching monsters walk free. Now I help people like you. He tapped his pen on a yellow legal pad. First thing we do, find out what they've done since you died. They're not just celebrating your funeral. They're moving pieces. Quietly, fast. And then, he said with a slow, dangerous smile. We make them regret ever underestimating you. That night, I sat on the porch outside my tiny room, staring at the moon's reflection on the water. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I was angry. And under all that anger, I felt something else, determination. They thought they'd buried me. But I was still here. And I was going to take back everything. I've always believed in keeping good records. Thomas used to tease me about my labeled files, my handwritten lists, the notes I left myself on the fridge. You run this house like a command center, he'd say. And he was right. It's how I made sense of the world. So when Danny asked for every detail I could remember about my finances, my doctors, my lawyers, every thread Michael and Samantha might have pulled, I didn't hesitate. I stayed up most of that night at Mrs. Chen's worn kitchen table, scrawling names, dates, phone numbers, access codes, everything. By sunrise, I'd built a map of betrayal. They didn't do this alone, I told Danny. They couldn't have. There's too much paperwork, too many moving parts. Someone's been feeding them information. Danny nodded, flipping through the pages. Your financial advisor, your estate attorney, even your doctor, anyone with access to your records could be involved. What do we do first? We check the narrative they're telling the world. What story did they write after you went into the water? Because I guarantee it's more fiction than fact. Danny started making calls, discreet ones. He pulled favors from old contacts in Boston, some still in law enforcement, some not. I stayed close to the bed and breakfast, venturing out only in disguise an old coat from Mrs. Chen's lost and found closet, a baseball cap that belonged to Ethan. On the third day, Danny came back with answers and more questions. They've already filed the initial probate paperwork, he said, setting down a folder, claiming you died intestate. What? I snapped. That's not true. I updated my will 2 years ago. I made sure everything was in writing. I believe you, but this, he flipped open the folder, is what the court has. He slid the papers toward me. I didn't need to read far. The text was completely different. My signature was at the bottom, but it wasn't my will. Not even close. This is a forgery, I whispered. Danny nodded. A good one, but not good enough. We'll get it analyzed. In the meantime, we need to know who filed this. R. He pointed to the signature line. Miranda Torres, Esquire. The name hit me like a slap. She was at a charity event I attended with Samantha. A trust lawyer, I think. Asked a lot of questions about our estate. She's more than that, Danny said. I did some digging. She specializes in what she calls family succession planning, but what it really is, Eleanor, is accelerated inheritance. She's done this before. My mouth went dry. You mean this is a pattern? At least 6 other cases I can track. Elderly clients with large estates and estranged children. Each one died suddenly after being declared incompetent or mentally unfit. Always with a new will. Always handled by Miranda Torres. My chest tightened. What happened to the families? They walked away with millions. And the elderly people? He met my eyes. No one ever asked too many questions. I sat back, stunned. My situation wasn't unique. It was systematic, organized. And now, I was the latest target. What about Michael and Samantha? I asked. What have they done since I died? They've moved fast. Closed your condo, cleared your accounts, transferred assets into a joint trust administered by Torres. They're acting like the ink on your death certificate is dry. My hands curled into fists. Let's change that, I said. We began quietly. Danny had a contact at a local photo lab old school, no questions asked. I handed over a disposable camera I'd kept hidden in a jewelry box, filled with shots of documents I'd taken during a visit to my former home. Samantha had never asked for my old house key back, and I'd never offered. Late on night, I'd let myself in. It was eerie, walking those rooms again. Everything was the same, but colder. The pictures on the walls had changed. My photo with Thomas was gone, replaced by some abstract modern art. The living room smelled like a hotel sterile, overcleaned. I searched the home office. It had once been Thomas's study. Now it was a command center for deception. Papers, timelines, email printouts, financial statements, a file labeled Eleanor, Phase 3. They'd labeled my death as a phase. A bullet point on a checklist. I took pictures of everything. That same night, I heard voices downstairs and barely escaped through the back door. But before I slipped out, I heard something that chilled me more than the Atlantic ever could. A baby crying. A real, live infant. Michael and Samantha had never mentioned a child. Never said they were expecting. But there, in the heart of the house they stole from me, was a baby I'd never seen or heard about. I told Danny. I told Henry. I told Linda. None of us knew what it meant yet, but we were going to find out. A few days later, Danny came back with more surveillance photos. Michael and Samantha had been seen entering a private medical facility outside Boston twice. It specialized in reproductive medicine, IVF, surrogacy, and other less savory things for the ultra-wealthy. Is it theirs? I asked. Danny shook his head. Unlikely. No record of a birth, no medical leave. But get this, there's a new birth certificate. Baby boy. Parents listed. Michael and Samantha Whitmore. Signed 3 weeks ago. And that baby in my house, I whispered. They faked it, bought it. And that baby, Danny added grimly, is now the named heir to your estate under the forged will. I leaned back in the chair, the pieces falling into place like a nightmare puzzle. They replaced me with a baby. They tried, he said, but you're not gone yet. I smiled. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt control slipping back into my hands. Let's make them wish I had been. People think ghosts are cold, that they haunt places, linger in corners, make the air go still. But the truth is, ghosts aren't cold at all. They're furious. I realized that one morning as I sat with Henry on the dock behind Mrs. Chen's place, sipping strong coffee and watching the sun rise over the sea that should have claimed me. I wasn't just a woman who'd survived an attempted murder. I was a ghost to the world, dead on paper, grieved in headlines, immortalized in fake tributes, and I planned to use that to my advantage. They think you're gone, Danny said. They think they won. I looked up from the stack of documents we'd spread across the picnic table, photos of forged papers, copies of new bank accounts in Samantha's name, a diagram of Torres's connections to medical professionals, judges, even funeral homes. Then it's time we haunt them, I said. Danny smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Our first step was simple. Psychological warfare. No police. No courtroom. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, I wanted fear. Doubt. Confusion. I wanted them to feel what I had felt floating in the Atlantic. Powerless, disoriented, alone. Danny orchestrated the delivery. An elegant envelope, cream-colored and monogrammed, just like the ones I used for holiday cards. Inside, a handwritten note. Dear Michael and Samantha, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. We need to talk. Love? Mom. P.S. Give my regards to little Robert Sarah. He's beautiful. We sent it to Miranda Torres's law office via courier, delivered at precisely 11:47 a.m., while the three of them were mid-meeting. Danny watched from across the street with a camera. He said Torres's face turned white as paper. Michael dropped his phone. Samantha stood up so fast she knocked over her water glass. They left the building within minutes. Panic is a lovely thing to watch when it's happening to your enemies. The next step was more delicate. Carol Peterson. She was the private nurse hired to care for the baby in my former home. According to Danny's background check, she was clean, a single mother, overworked, underpaid, and with no idea what she'd been pulled into. So, I went to visit. It was the first time I returned to my old house since the incident. I wore a scarf, sunglasses, kept my head down. When Carol opened the door, she gasped, staggered back like she'd seen a specter. "You're alive?" I said gently. "Yes, and I need your help." She let me in. The baby, my grandson by legal lie, was asleep in a bassinet in the living room. I stepped quietly toward him. He was beautiful, dark-haired, tiny fists balled up near his chin. I felt something inside me fracture and rebuild all at once. "What's his name?" I whispered. They said, Robert Jr., after his grandfather. I nodded, though the name stung. They'd taken even that from me. "He's not theirs, is he?" Carol asked. "No," I said. "He was born to a 17-year-old girl named Sarah Collins. No family, no support. She died giving birth under suspicious circumstances. And Michael and Samantha bought the child, forged papers, called him their own." Carol sank into the armchair, face pale. "I didn't know." "I believe you," I said. "That's why I'm here." I gave her the photos, the papers, Sarah's real name. I told her about Torres, about the others, about the plan to wipe me out and, if necessary, the baby too. "They won't stop," I said. "If they think this child is a liability, they'll find a way to erase him, like they tried to erase me." Carol looked at the baby. "What do you want me to do?" "Stay. For now. Keep caring for him. But watch everything. Record what they say. Take notes. And when the time comes, help me save him." She nodded. "He deserves better." "Yes," I said. "He does." And as I left the house, I felt something shift in me, some ancient part that only wakes up when you realize you're no longer just fighting for yourself. I was fighting for someone who couldn't fight back. The final piece came from Ethan. He'd been quiet, hovering at the edge of our meetings. But one evening, he came to me with a file folder he'd found while helping Henry repair an old shed. "Looked like trash," he said. But it wasn't. Inside were names, dates, cross-referenced files from Miranda Torres's other clients, notes in shorthand, a pattern, all leading to the same conclusion. Torres wasn't working alone. She'd built a network, medical staff, estate planners, care facilities, even hospice nurses. People who could quietly assess elderly clients, identify vulnerabilities, and report back. Then came the intervention. Sedatives misprescribed, wills rewritten, estates transferred. Always clean, always quiet. Danny studied the list and whistled. "This isn't fraud," he said. "It's organized crime. We have enough to go to the authorities," I said. He looked at me. "Are you ready for that?" I thought of Sarah Collins. I thought of the baby asleep in the next room. I thought of the woman I'd once been naive enough to believe her son would never turn against her. "Yes," I said. "Let's bring them down." But before we could take that step, before we could hand our case to the feds, Miranda Torres made her next move. She sent a man. He came to Mrs. Chen's bed and breakfast just before dawn, tall, clean-cut, government ID on his jacket. "I'm looking for Eleanor Whitmore," he said. "There's been a development in the case involving her estate." Mrs. Chen didn't flinch. "Never heard of her. I have reason to believe she's been spotted in this area. If she makes contact, call this number." He left the card on the front desk. We found it later blank on one side. The other had a phone number that Danny traced back to a burner registered in Brooklyn. "He's not a cop," Danny said. "He's a cleaner." "Sent to do what?" Ethan asked. "Whatever it takes." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I packed a go bag, wrote a final statement, recorded a message in case I didn't survive, because we weren't playing a game anymore. We were going to war. I'd spent my whole life playing by the rules. When Thomas built his company, I was the one who organized the ledgers, kept the books clean, made sure every tax form was filed before the deadline. I made dinner. I hosted charity events. I smiled at the neighbors. I raised my son to believe that decency mattered. But now, sitting in a hidden cottage on the edge of a Massachusetts island, I realized something unsettling. The rules had never protected me. When Michael and Samantha pushed me off that yacht, they weren't just betraying a mother. They were testing the system, betting that greed wrapped in legalese would win. And for a moment, it did. But that moment was over. Danny returned to the safe house with grim news. "She's cleaning house," he said, laying down a photo of a man slumped in a hotel chair, a neat bullet hole in his temple. This was the cleaner, the one Torres sent to finish the job. I stared at the image, a chill blooming in my chest. She killed him? She couldn't risk him flipping. He had a record, worked for her before. But here's the problem. If she's willing to do this to her own fixer, she won't hesitate to come after anyone else. "Me," I said, "the baby." And Jake was standing by the window, arms folded. He hadn't spoken much since we got to the island, but I could feel the storm brewing inside him. "She's tying up loose ends," he said, "which means we're next." "No," I said, "we're going to end this before she does." I looked at Danny. "What's the next move?" "We need her on tape, confessing. Ideally with Michael and Samantha in the room. If we get that, the feds will have no choice but to act. But we need bait." "Oh." I already knew what he meant. "You want me to go back," I said. Danny didn't answer right away. "We'll rig the house with audio. Maybe video if Carol can help. You'll confront them, get them talking. They'll try to stall you until Torres arrives. We let them think it's working until the FBI walks in." Jake turned toward me, his jaw clenched. "It's suicide." "No," I said quietly. "It's justice." We began preparing that night. Carol agreed to stay in the house, continuing to care for baby Robert Sarah, but she also planted the recording devices Danny gave her, small, discreet, designed for long-range pickups. She even set up a few hidden cameras, just in case. Samantha and Michael were predictable. Still shaken by the note, still paranoid. They spent most of their time at the house now, probably waiting for a ghost to show up at their doorstep. And she would. At 5 p.m. The next day, I stood across the street from my old home in Beacon Hill, heart thudding in my chest. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn the day they tried to kill me. Same pearls, same lipstick. I looked like a ghost on purpose. Danny's voice crackled in my ear. "We're live. FBI is 5 minutes away. You sure about this?" I smiled. "Let's haunt some criminals." I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. Michael answered. For a moment, we just stared at each other. His face drained of color. He dropped the keys in his hand. "Mum." "Hello, Michael," I said. "Mind if I come in?" He stepped back automatically, too stunned to stop me. Samantha was in the living room. She turned, saw me, and screamed. Actually screamed, like she'd seen a ghost. I stepped into the room and sat in my favorite armchair, the one Thomas had given me on our 20th anniversary. "How was the meeting with Miranda?" I asked calmly. They didn't speak. "Did you sign anything important while I was away?" Still silence. "Don't worry. I know everything. The baby, the forged will, Sarah Collins, the cleaner Torres sent. You're in deeper than you think." Samantha finally found her voice. "You're supposed to be dead." "Yes, a common misunderstanding." "Prove it," she snapped. "You think you can just walk in here and make accusations?" "Oh, I can do better than that," I said, crossing my legs. "I can play you the tape, and—" Her mouth snapped shut. "I've been watching you for days," I continued. "Everything you've said, every document you've altered, every lie you've told, I have it all." Michael swallowed hard. "What? What do you want?" Before I could answer, the front door opened, and Miranda Torres walked in. She was smaller than I remembered, expensively dressed, calm, calculated. "Well," she said, "this is unexpected." I stood slowly. "Miranda Torres," I said, "welcome to the house you helped steal. You're very brave," she said, stepping forward. "Or very stupid. Let's find out which." She looked at Michael and Samantha. "Why is she here?" "She just showed up," Samantha said. We didn't call you yet." Miranda glanced around the room. Her eyes landed on the baby monitor on the bookshelf, one of the hidden audio transmitters Danny had planted. She stepped closer. Too close. "I suppose we'll have to accelerate things," she said, reaching into her handbag. But before she could move another inch, the front windows shattered. "FBI, hands where we can see them." Agents flooded the room through the door, the windows even from the back staircase. Miranda froze. Michael dropped to the ground. Samantha raised her hands, trembling, and I just stood there, alive, whole, and very, very angry. Agent Sarah Chen approached me, hand on her shoulder holster. "Mrs. Whitmore, you did it." "No," I said. "We did." She nodded toward the baby's room. "We have a child to protect. And a story to tell." As the agents read Miranda Torres her rights, I stepped into the hallway where Carol was holding Robert Sarah. I took him into my arms. "It's over," I whispered. "You're safe now." And for the first time in weeks, I believed it. The house was chaos. FBI agents moved through each room like bees in a hive, taking photos, bagging evidence, logging statements. I stood in the center of it all, cradling baby Robert Sarah in my arms, watching as the empire Michael and Samantha had tried to build on fraud, murder, and lies crumbled around them. Samantha was handcuffed on the sofa, staring blankly ahead, as if none of this could possibly be real. Michael sat on the floor nearby, head in his hands, shaking slightly. I wondered if it was guilt or just the weight of being caught. It didn't matter. The result would be the same. Miranda Torres had gone down screaming. "This is entrapment. This is illegal. I want my lawyer." Agent Sarah Chen hadn't even flinched. She just read the charges calmly, clearly, one by one. Conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and the list went on. Torres had tried to run, just like I knew she would, but the moment she reached for her phone, she was tackled by 2 agents. Now, she sat cuffed in a chair by the window, fuming, her expensive suit smeared with dust from the floor she'd been thrown onto. Danny entered the room, holding a clear plastic evidence bag. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a folded document, the forged will, the one that had nearly cost me my life. I took it and stared at the signature at the bottom, a near-perfect replica of mine. The ink even looked like my favorite pen. They'd thought of everything except for me surviving. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady. Danny gave me a nod and turned to continue briefing the agents. A few feet away, Carol rocked slightly on her heels, eyes darting between the baby and the agents. I stepped over and placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You did everything right," I told her. She nodded, but her face was pale. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought I was helping them. They said they were heartbroken. They said you wanted the baby to have a good life. You were lied to," I said gently. "But you chose the truth when it mattered." That was all anyone could ask. It took hours to finish the initial sweep of the house. I was interviewed 3 separate times, once by Agent Chen, once by a federal prosecutor who'd flown in from D.C., and once by a woman from the Department of Elder Affairs. They all asked the same question: "How did you survive?" And I told them about Henry, about Ethan, about Mrs. Chen, about Danny, about Carol, and most importantly, about Sarah Collins. The room went quiet when I spoke her name. "She was 17, I said, from Maine, alone, vulnerable. Miranda Torres found her, promised her money, promised her a clean birth and a good family for her baby. And what happened instead?" the prosecutor asked softly. "She died," I said, "on a delivery table from a complication that shouldn't have happened. The official cause was cardiac arrest, but I have witness testimony that Torres administered a drug just minutes before she stopped breathing." Agent Chen leaned forward. "Do you believe it was intentional?" "I believe Sarah Collins was murdered," I said, "so that my son and daughter-in-law could inherit a fortune." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't hopeless. It was the sound of justice starting to move. The next day, I stood on the steps of the courthouse in Boston, watching as Torres was led into a van, still defiant despite the evidence stacked against her. Her network was already unraveling arrests in 3 states, grand juries convened, bank accounts frozen. And Michael and Samantha? They hadn't said a word since the arrest. Their attorneys had tried everything: plea negotiations, insanity claims, even the ridiculous idea that I'd faked my own death to frame them. But the recordings told the truth. The documents told the truth. And I was still alive. They would face trial. They would be held accountable. And they would finally understand what it meant to be powerless in the face of something bigger than themselves. The law. The truth. Me. Later that week, I sat in a quiet office at the family court building, baby Robert Sarah sleeping in a car seat beside me. A judge in her 60s adjusted her glasses and looked down at the papers in front of her. Mrs. Whitmore, you are petitioning for full legal guardianship of the child formerly known as Robert Whitmore, Jr. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you understand the responsibility that entails? I do. Heir. And why do you believe you are the best person to raise this child? I looked at the baby, his tiny chest rising and falling. I thought of Sarah Collins, of the life she'd never get to live, of the courage it took to bring him into the world, even if that world failed her. Because he deserves the truth, I said. He deserves to grow up knowing where he came from, who his real mother was, what she sacrificed. The judge nodded. And his name? His name is Robert Sarah Whitmore, I said. Robert, after the grandfather who would have loved him, and Sarah, after the mother who gave him life. The judge signed the papers. It's official. And just like that, I became a mother again. 5 years have passed. I'm 77 now. Slower on my feet, maybe, but still sharp, still standing. And every morning, I wake up to the sound of laughter, real, honest laughter echoing through a home filled with toys, books, and love. Robert Sarah is 5 now. Smart, serious, gentle in a way that reminds me of Thomas, but curious too. Always asking questions, always watching. He knows his story, at least the parts a child can understand. He knows his first mother was brave. He knows some people make terrible choices, even when they should love you. And he knows the people who truly care will never let you fall off a boat and disappear. He is my family now, my only family, the best part of my life. And when he's older, I'll tell him everything. Because the only thing more powerful than surviving the truth is passing it on. Sometimes I think surviving is just the first act. What comes next, the living with it, the remembering, the rebuilding is harder. But every morning, when the light spills through the curtains of my new home and I hear the small feet of a 5-year-old pattering down the hallway, I know why I'm still here. Robert Sarah is the reason I breathe. The reason I get out of bed even when my knees scream and my joints remind me I'm not 30 anymore. He's the beginning of my second life, and, in many ways, the only family I have left. 5 years have passed since that night in my former home, when the ghosts of betrayal were finally exorcised by the full force of the FBI. Since Michael and Samantha were taken away in handcuffs, their carefully rehearsed roles as grieving heirs torn apart like the pages of the forged will they tried to pass off as mine. Since Miranda Torres was dragged from my living room, screaming about entrapment and legal technicalities, while I stood calmly holding the baby they all tried to use as a pawn. Peace, for a while, settled in. I moved back to the North Shore, not to Beacon Hill. That house was a shell now painted pretty by new owners who didn't know the blood and betrayal soaked into its hardwood floors. I chose a modest cottage near the sea, close enough to hear the waves, far enough to feel like I'd left something behind. Mrs. Chen still visits often. She insists on bringing homemade soup every time and nags me about my calcium intake like a sister. Jake? He retired last year, finally gave up the charter boat business. He takes Robert fishing every other Saturday. The boy loves him, calls him Captain Pops. Danny, of course, remained in my life. He never really left. He comes for Sunday coffee and updates me on his cases. Sometimes they're small missing persons, fraud investigations, the occasional cheating spouse. But sometimes he hears echoes of what we once uncovered. Quiet whispers, new names, familiar methods. That's how it started again. It was a Thursday morning in April when he came to my house, his usual calm expression replaced by something I hadn't seen in years. Worry. I don't mean to bring this to your doorstep again, Eleanor, he said, sliding a plain envelope across my kitchen table. But you need to see this. The envelope was unmarked. No stamp, no return address. It hadn't come through the mail. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper. On it, just 10 words, typed in a crisp serif font. You stopped one branch. The roots are still growing. No signature. No symbol. No demand. Just a quiet warning. I stared at it for a long moment. Do you know who sent this? Danny shook his head. No prints. No digital record. It was hand-delivered to my office. I think someone wants to talk but can't. Or someone wants to scare me, I said. Maybe. But Eleanor, I've been hearing chatter. New names. New estates. Elderly clients with suddenly rewritten wills. Strange medical issues. Unexpected deaths. I felt something stir in me. Something I'd buried deep, under years of trying to pretend that the worst was behind me. What do you have? Danny pulled out another folder, always with the manila folders, and flipped it open. 3 deaths in the past 8 months, all in different states, all ruled accidental, all preceded by dramatic changes to their estate plans, and all involving this man. He tapped a photo. Gavin Lorne. I leaned forward. The man in the picture was in his early 40s, expensive haircut, tailored suit, the kind of face that blends into hotel lobbies and charity galas. But something about him prickled at my memory. I've seen him before, I murmured. Danny nodded. Fundraiser, Boston, 2019. You were there with Samantha. Yes, my chest tightened. He was talking to Torres. Exactly. We think he was her understudy, her successor, and now he's replicating her model, expanding it, disguising it even better than she did. I looked back at the letter. You think this is connected to him? I think it's from someone inside, someone scared. My hands were steady. My voice wasn't. So we're doing this again. Danny's jaw clenched. Only if you want to. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, Robert was playing in the garden. His face lit up with laughter as he chased butterflies with a net. I watched him for a moment, the wind lifting his hair, his world still innocent. Then I turned back. If he's targeting people like me again, we stop him. Before another Sarah Collins happens. Before another baby becomes a pawn. Before another woman like me is left floating in the ocean, wondering if her life ever mattered. Danny didn't smile, but I saw the respect in his eyes. All right, he said. Let's go root hunting. The first thread we pulled led us to Savannah, Georgia. An estate consultant named Gavin Lorne had recently represented the legal interests of an elderly woman named Margot Delaney, 81, widow, no children, lived alone in a historic home passed down through generations. She'd been healthy by all accounts until a sudden fall down the stairs. She died instantly, 2 weeks before her death. She'd rewritten her will to include a private foundation managed by a board of trustees connected directly to Lorne's firm. It wasn't an inheritance, it was a siphon. I traveled to Savannah with Danny under an assumed name. At the hotel, I sat in front of the mirror brushing my hair and noticed, for the first time, how much silver had taken over. My face had new lines, but my eyes, still sharp. We met Margot's old housekeeper, a sweet woman named Bernice, at a small diner just off the riverfront. She was cautious at first, but once Danny explained who we were and what had happened to others like Margot, she leaned in and whispered, I knew it wasn't right. She told us how Gavin had shown up months earlier. So kind, she said, always bringing Margot chocolates, asking about her past, helping her sort through boxes of old memories. Grooming, Danny said quietly. Bernice's eyes filled with tears. She told me she was leaving everything to the Historical Society, but after she died, her lawyer said everything had gone to a trust. I never heard about no trust. We thanked her and left with copies of old voicemails Margot had left on Bernice's phone, one of them the day before she died. I think I made a mistake, Bernie. Something's wrong with this paperwork. Can you come by tomorrow? Tomorrow never came. I played that message over and over in my hotel room, my fingers gripping the phone so tight my knuckles went white. I saw myself in Margot. I saw what might have happened to me if I hadn't been strong enough or lucky enough to fight back. I looked at Danny. We need to bring this forward. He nodded. To the FBI? Yes. And to the press. I don't care if it's dangerous. They need to know someone's still watching, And someone is. Me. Because 5 years ago, they tried to bury me in the Atlantic. Now I'm back, not just to survive, but to make damn sure no one else ever has to float in the dark, wondering if their family would rather see them dead than alive. Returning to the spotlight, after being declared legally dead, isn't something you prepare for. There's no manual for what to wear, what to say, or how to explain to the world that the rumors of your demise were exaggerated twice. But I've learned one thing in my 77 years. Silence only protects the guilty. So I put on my best blazer, the one Thomas always said made me look like I could run a boardroom and a battlefield in the same breath, and I called a press conference. Danny wasn't thrilled. "Eleanor," he said gently, "this puts a target on your back." Again. I looked at him, calm, clear. "Then let them aim. I've survived worse." The conference took place in a modest room inside the Boston Public Library. Danny had coordinated with a few journalists he trusted, investigative types, the kind who don't flinch when the story gets dark. I stood at the podium, palms steady, voice unwavering. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore," I began. 5 years ago, I was pushed off a yacht by my only child, left to drown so he could inherit a fortune I never promised him. The world believed I was dead. But I lived. I survived, and I watched justice be served. But today, I'm here because it's happening again. I laid out the evidence carefully, methodically. The pattern of deaths, the financial shifts, the new name rising from the ashes of Miranda Torres' empire, Gavin Lorne. I shared Margot Delaney's voicemail, and I said her name with the reverence she deserved. I won't let another woman like Margot be erased. By the time I finished, the room was silent. No flashing cameras, no whispers, just breath held. And then came the questions. They asked about Gavin, about the new victims, about what I planned to do. And I told them, I will not stop until every person involved in this scheme is exposed. I have no interest in revenge. I have no need for closure. What I seek is protection for the vulnerable, for the silenced, for the people still walking through this world unaware that someone sees their name as a dollar sign. I was that name once. I will not be again. The fallout was immediate. Gavin Lorne went into hiding within 24 hours of the press conference. His offices in Atlanta were shuttered. His foundation board issued a public statement of surprise and concern, but Danny had seen it before. He's not surprised, he said. He's regrouping. And he was right, because just a week later, a package arrived at my doorstep. It contained a photo of Robert Sarah, my grandson, walking home from school, clutching his lunchbox and smiling. No note, no return address. Just a silent threat. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I called Agent Sarah Chen. She had been promoted since our last battle together now, a federal task force leader for crimes against the elderly. She answered on the first ring. "Chen," she said. "It's starting again," I told her. She didn't ask what I meant. She just said, "Where do you want to meet?" We met in a government building in downtown Boston. Windowless, secure. Chen came with 2 analysts and a digital case file already open on the projector. Danny was there too, standing off to the side like a bodyguard with a badge. We walked them through everything Margot's case, Bernice's testimony, the foundation money, the threats. Chen didn't flinch. "He's building something Miranda only dreamed of," she said. "A national network, not just inheritance schemes, full financial erasure. These victims don't just die. They vanish. Their money moves silently. Their homes are repurposed. Their histories deleted." "And the families?" I asked. "Some don't have any. Others are paid off. But a few, they just don't ask questions." "Then we ask them," I said. Danny looked at Chen. "Can you move now? We're close. But we need more. We need someone inside." I raised my hand. "You already have someone." Chen stared at me. "You want to go undercover? I want to end this." She leaned forward. "Eleanor, these people don't just lie. They eliminate. You're not just bait, you're the target. End of China." Then I'm the perfect one to walk through the door. The plan was simple. Gavin Lorne had begun advertising a new financial service aimed at legacy transitions, a sleek rebranding of Torres' succession planning. His newest office was in Philadelphia. We created a persona, Eleanor Williams, a wealthy widow from New England with no immediate family, recently diagnosed with early memory decline. I hated the lie, hated pretending to be what they wanted. But it worked. Within 3 days, I had a consultation booked with one of Lorne's junior partners, a man named Curtis Red. Danny and Agent Chen fitted me with 2 transmitters, one in my bracelet, one sewn into the hem of my jacket. A team would be parked nearby. I'd be under constant surveillance. Still, when I walked into that glass building, modern, efficient, cold, I felt the weight of everything I'd survived pressing down on my shoulders. Curtis was charming, polished, perfect teeth. He offered me tea, complimented my scarf, asked about my worries in managing such a large estate. I played the part. "You know, my son passed a few years ago," I said softly. "It's just me and my grandson now, and sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. My memory isn't what it used to be." He leaned in, sympathetic. "You're not alone, Mrs. Williams. That's what we do here. We help families prepare gently, responsibly." He smiled. "Let's talk about legacy." And just like that, I stepped back into the trap. But this time, I was holding the scissors. It's strange. The things you remember when you're pretending to forget. As I sat across the desk from Curtis Red, nodding gently as he explained succession optimization strategies and preliminary estate pathway mapping, I thought about Thomas, how he used to chuckle at legalese, calling it a fog made of paper. And I thought about the moment 5 years ago when I first realized my own son wanted me gone. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. Because now, I wasn't Eleanor Whitmore. I was Eleanor Williams, retired, wealthy, wistful, and slowly declining. Curtis led me through a soft line of questioning. Was I feeling forgetful? Did I have anyone helping me manage my finances? Had I considered moving into a private senior community? I played the part with practiced grace. "Sometimes I do forget things," I said, touching my bracelet as if for comfort, really pressing the embedded transmitter. "That's why I want to make sure everything is clear, for my grandson." "Of course," he said, scribbling notes. "And how old is your grandson now?" 5, I said. "A little miracle," Curtis smiled. "And you're his legal guardian?" I paused just enough to seem unsure. "Yes, I believe so. His mother passed. I took over." He nodded, his eyes flicking to the digital file on his tablet. I knew he'd cross-check that detail later. He wouldn't find anything. Chen's team had already created a perfectly scrubbed paper trail. "What about the child's father?" he asked gently. I gave him the smile I had reserved, once, for those who ask too much. He was never in the picture, and that was enough for now. He slid a thin packet across the desk. "We typically begin with a statement of intent," he said. "It's not binding, just a declaration of your current wishes. You can write a short paragraph if you like." I nodded, took the pen, and wrote one sentence. "I will not be buried quietly." I watched his eyebrows twitch. He looked up, suddenly unsure. I smiled. "Oh, don't mind me," I said sweetly. "Sometimes I just like to remind myself I'm still here." Outside, I debriefed with Chen and Danny. "Curtis is the recruiter," Danny said. "He tests the boundaries, profiles the client, then hands them off." Chen nodded. "We need the next link. Gavin himself." I tapped the folder Curtis had given me. "He'll want to meet me," I said. I left enough contradictions in there to make me interesting. I was right. 2 days later, I received a call from a private number. A voice, smooth and deliberate. "Mrs. Williams, my name is Gavin Lorne. I understand you had a lovely conversation with one of my associates. I'd like to invite you to a private session just to ensure everything is aligned with your wishes." His tone was calm, but I felt the chill behind it. "I'd be honored," I said. He scheduled the meeting in a town outside Philadelphia. Quiet, rural, discreet. Not a corporate tower. A house. That alone set every alarm bell ringing. But I agreed. We arrived at the house just before sunset. It was elegant, in that antiseptic way realtors call move-in ready. Not a picture on the walls. Not a fingerprint on the doorknobs. Chen's team had cameras set up in a van 2 blocks away. My transmitters were live. My pulse? A drumbeat in my ears. Gavin Lorne met me at the door. He looked just like he did in the photo, maybe a bit older, a touch more tired, but no less dangerous. His eyes scanned me like a scanner at airport security. "Come in, Mrs. Williams." We sat in a pristine dining room. Tea had been set expensive china, untouched sugar cubes. Everything curated for comfort. "I've reviewed your file," he said. "You've had quite a life." "Yes," I said. "I've tried to live it well." He folded his hands. "And you want to make sure your legacy lives on." "That's right. What would you say your greatest regret is?" I blinked. That wasn't a standard question. "I don't believe in regrets," I replied. "Most people do," he said. "Especially near the end." I leaned forward. "Is that what you think I'm near?" He smiled, just a flicker of teeth. "Number, I think you're sharper than you let on. I think you've lost before. But I also think you came here looking for something." I let the silence grow. Let him wonder. Then I said softly, "And what do you think I found?" His eyes didn't leave mine. "Me." The conversation turned after that. He asked fewer questions about estate plans, more about fear, memory, power. He told me about the importance of peace of mind, how families suffer when decisions are delayed, how clarity protects the innocent. It was all a mask. Underneath I saw it. The same cold calculation I saw in Torres, but refined, less sloppy. Gavin didn't want to steal from me. He wanted to rewrite me. "I believe in helping people let go," he said finally. "Of fear, of pain, of control." I reached for my teacup. "And what if someone doesn't want to let go?" He smiled. "Then they resist, for a while. And then?" He leaned back. "Then they forget why they fought in the first place." A chill ran through me, not from the words, but from how calmly he said them. I pressed the button on my bracelet 3 times. The extraction signal. Outside, I knew Chen's team would be ready. Inside, I stood slowly. "Well, Mr. Lorne," I said, "I thank you for your time, but I think I'll be taking my legacy with me." His smile didn't fade. "Of course." But as I turned to leave, he said one more thing. "Tell Eleanor Whitmore she's not the only one who came back from the dead." I froze, just long enough for the fear to take root. Then I walked out of that house and didn't look back. But I knew one thing. He knew who I was. It was a trap. Not just the house, or the tea, or the sterile warmth of Gavin Lorne's smile. It was all a test. A challenge. He knew who I was before I walked through the door. That wasn't just confidence. That was certainty. By the time I made it back to the surveillance van, I could barely catch my breath. Chen was waiting for me with a cup of water. "You were brilliant in there," she said. "Every word's on tape, but it won't matter," I said, sitting heavily. "He never said anything illegal, nothing direct." "True," Danny added. "But the subtext? He admitted he manipulates, that he erases resistance. The coded language is enough to convince a grand jury to listen, but it's not enough to make an arrest." I looked at the audio technician. Did he know he was being recorded? The man hesitated. If he did, he didn't care. Exactly. Gavin Lorne wasn't afraid. Not of the law, not of the truth, not even of death. And that made him dangerous in a way Miranda Torres had never been. She was desperate. Gavin, he was devout, a believer in what he was doing. We spent the next week tearing apart every connection he had. Danny worked day and night, mapping the corporate web nonprofits that funneled funds into dummy trusts, legal firms that had changed names 5 times in as many years, doctors with histories of quietly removing elderly patients from care plans. It wasn't just estate theft anymore. It was annihilation. They were targeting the lonely, the forgotten. Not to take their money, but to disappear them, to erase the human evidence that they ever existed at all. And Gavin wasn't just the architect. He was the evangelist. "He calls it ethical succession," Danny said, dropping a new stack of files on my kitchen table. "Says it's a kindness, removing burdens from the next generation." I clenched my hands. "And how many people has he helped kindly vanish?" Chen gave me the answer. 47. 47 people. 47 lives. 47 families, many of them still unaware. I looked at the map. 1 red pin for each victim. And I made a decision. "We're not going to stop him quietly," I said. "We're going to drag him into the light." We set the trap in Baltimore. One of Gavin's newest clients, Estelle Marks, 74, a widow with a modest fortune and an art collection worth more than her entire house, had just signed over durable power of attorney to one of Lorne's intermediaries. But what Gavin didn't know was that Estelle wasn't just a target. She was a volunteer. Danny had known her for years, trusted her. And Estelle was furious when she learned how close she'd come to being erased. We rigged her house with cameras, planted trackers on every envelope, every document, wired her for sound during every meeting with Lorne's team. And we waited. The meeting was set for a Thursday. Gavin wasn't supposed to come in person, but he did. He walked through Estelle's door like he owned the place, wearing his usual custom suit, his hair too perfect, his tone too calm. "I wanted to speak with you personally," he told Estelle. "Make sure you feel seen." He never even noticed the microphone in the antique brooch she wore, or the FBI agents listening from across the street. This time, Gavin got comfortable. He spoke more freely, described the transfer of assets, called it a soft pivot into long-term relinquishment. And when Estelle hesitated, asked if maybe she needed more time, he said something that made the entire van fall silent. "I've helped over 40 people transition in peace. Some didn't even realize it was happening. That's how smooth this process is." Chen didn't wait. She gave the signal. Agents burst through the door before Gavin could blink. He didn't resist, didn't yell. He just smiled. As they read him his rights, he looked past them, past the flashing lights and the shouting. He looked directly at the camera feed, at me, and said one thing: "This won't stop it." Then he was gone. In cuffs, in custody, but not afraid. That night, I sat by the fire with Robert asleep upstairs. Chen had called to tell me Gavin was being processed. The press would pick it up by morning. "You did it," she said. "No," I whispered. "We started it." Because she was right. This wouldn't stop it. But maybe, just maybe, it would slow it down. Long enough for someone else to pick up where I left off. Or better yet, for me to keep going. Because if they wanted me to fade quietly into the night, they should have made sure I never saw the sunrise. They say when you cut off a head, the body dies. But that's not true when the head is just a mask. Gavin Lorne's arrest made headlines. Phantom executor caught. Estate killer brought to justice. The media had a field day. Talk shows debated his motivations. Experts speculated about mental illness, about cult-like ideologies, about the hidden cruelty in white-collar crime. But underneath the celebration, something didn't sit right with me. I saw it in his eyes when they led him away. Calm. Too calm. Like a man who'd done what he came to do and was already thinking 10 steps ahead. So when Agent Chen called and asked if I would come in for one more conversation, I knew it wouldn't be to sign off a victory. She met me in a private room beneath a government building. No windows, just flickering fluorescents and the quiet hum of surveillance monitors. "I'm not supposed to show you this," she said, placing a folder on the table between us. "But you've earned more than clearance." I opened the file. Inside were transcripts of phone calls Gavin made after his arrest from jail. He wasn't calling family. He wasn't calling a lawyer. He was calling numbers that traced back to foundations, institutions, a private endowment run by a think tank in Virginia, a hospital administration board in New York, a retirement community trust in California, all of them silent partners in Gavin's ethical succession model. "He wasn't the boss," Chen said. "He was the showman." I felt a chill that reached my bones. "So this goes higher. Mook higher." I sat back in the chair, closing the folder slowly. They weren't just letting this happen. They were funding it. Chen nodded. "And protecting it." Over the next few days, I watched a parade of headlines disappear. Initial news about Gavin's arrest was everywhere. But then, as if someone pulled a lever, it all began to vanish. Links broken, stories removed. Pending litigation, excuses issued. Danny confirmed it. "Servers down, redirected links, someone's burying this fast." Even Estelle brave, furious Estelle received a letter from a law firm threatening civil suit if she continued speaking publicly. We knew what this meant. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, control. And that's when I made the hardest decision of my life. I went on camera. Not for a press conference. Not with media handlers or edited sound bites. This time, I spoke into my own lens. Danny and I filmed it in my living room. Robert asleep in the next room. The sound of waves crashing faintly through the open window. I told the whole story, from the yacht, to the baby, to the betrayal, from Miranda to Gavin, to the institutions that propped them up, quietly benefiting from the disappearance of the vulnerable. I didn't use names. I used truths. I said, what I've seen isn't just criminal. It's cultural. It's how we treat the old when we think no one is watching. It's how we excuse injustice when it wears a nice suit and says all the right things. I told people to ask questions about their parents, their neighbors, the sudden changes in paperwork, the quiet signatures. I told them to watch, to remember, to fight. And then I said, they tried to drown me once. Then they tried to erase me again, but I survived. And now, I speak not because I want revenge, but because I believe you deserve to know who's next. We uploaded the video. Within hours, it spread. Not viral, not flashy, but steady. Like a candle catching other candles. People started reaching out, quietly, stories I hadn't heard, names I'd never seen. And I realized, this wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. The next morning, Robert climbed into my lap and asked me why I looked tired. I smiled and kissed the top of his head. Because telling the truth takes work, sweetheart. He looked at me, wide-eyed. Did someone lie again? Yes, I said, but we're helping people remember what's real. Like stories? Exactly, I whispered. Like stories. And maybe, in the end, that's all we are. Stories told about us. Or by us. And I'll be damned if I let someone else write the ending to mine. You would think that surviving attempted murder at the hands of your own child would be the worst of it. But what chilled me even more was what I discovered next. My story wasn't rare. As Danny and I dug deeper into Miranda Torres's background, we uncovered a web that was far bigger, darker, and more methodical than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just one family's betrayal. It was a pattern, a system. And I had nearly become just another number in their ledger. I remember sitting at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table with folders spread in front of me. There were names, dozens of them. Seniors, mostly widows, all of them wealthy, all of them declared incompetent or tragically deceased under suspicious circumstances, and all of them with relatives who conveniently inherited everything within weeks. Every case followed a script. First, isolate the target, convince them they're forgetful, fragile, a burden. Then, slowly take over power of attorney, bank access, changing the will. If they protested, it became proof of their decline. If they asked too many questions, it was time to accelerate the process. That was their phrase. Not kill, not eliminate. They called it accelerating the process. It was happening everywhere, in suburbs, in cities, to people who had built businesses, raised families, paid their taxes, loved their children, and were repaid with lies and betrayal in their final years. I saw faces in those files, not statistics. People. Eleanor R., 74, found drowned in her bathtub. Stroke, they said. But she told her friend she was afraid of her nephew, who'd moved in just 2 months earlier. Charles B., 81, who fell down the stairs of his summer home after signing over his properties to his daughter's trust. A 92-year-old woman with early-stage dementia whose house was sold, her belongings auctioned, and who ended up in a state-run care facility 3 counties away from the family that had sworn to protect her. These people weren't just victims of greedy relatives. They were victims of an entire system that let this happen. Lawyers who turned a blind eye, doctors who signed off on false diagnoses, judges too overloaded or too lazy to question the paperwork in front of them. And in the middle of it all was Miranda Torres, calm, professional, untouchable. But not anymore. The weight of what I had stumbled into pressed down on me. This wasn't just about getting justice for myself or even for Sarah Collins and her baby. It was about stopping a machine that had been grinding people like me into dust for years. Danny looked up from his notes. "You know what this is?" he asked me. "A massacre," I said quietly. He nodded. A financial genocide, hidden behind paperwork and good manners. We both sat there in silence for a moment. The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the next room, baby Robert Sarah gurgled softly in his sleep. I reached over and touched one of the case files gently. These people, Someone has to speak for them. Danny looked at me. You still want to testify? I want to burn it all down. And I meant it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the people who had died with no one to fight for them. I thought about their last moments, the confusion, the betrayal, the loneliness. Then I thought about Sarah, 17 years old, scared, alone, and trusting the wrong people because she thought she was giving her child a better life. I wouldn't let it end that way. Not for her, not for any of them. This wasn't just my revenge anymore. It was a reckoning. I used to think surviving was the hard part. But in truth, what comes after survival, the choice to stand up, speak out, and fight for others. That's where the real work begins. After the video of my testimony spread, something unexpected happened. People started writing to me. Not just sympathy, not just support. Stories, widows from California, grandfathers in Texas, quiet, frightened voices from small towns I'd never heard of, all of them saying the same thing, in different words. This happened to me too. It wasn't just a few bad apples. It wasn't just Miranda Torres or Gavin Lorne. This was a system. Caregivers manipulating legal forms, nieces and nephews pressuring their elders to sign over properties, power of attorney used like a weapon, doctors who signed away competency with a quick pen, lawyers who filed silent wills in back rooms, judges too busy or too trusting to notice the patterns. And those patterns all pointed to the same cruel truth. Older Americans were being erased, not just financially, spiritually, historically. We needed more than justice. We needed change. The first thing I did was call Danny and Rosa Manning, the elder law professor who'd become my fiercest ally. We sat around Mrs. Chen's kitchen table, just like we did in the early days, and we made a plan. This can't be just about exposing the past, Rosa said. We need to prevent the next Eleanor Whitmore before she disappears. So we built a campaign. Not flashy, not political, but honest. We started a coalition of families who had been affected. A nurse who had seen too many seniors sign papers they didn't understand. A former financial advisor who had left his firm after discovering how often older clients were being targeted. A retired judge who confessed he'd once signed off on a guardianship that he now regretted deeply. And me, the woman who'd come back from the dead. We started speaking at town halls, churches, VFW lodges, senior centers. Not with slides or statistics, but with stories. I told them about Margot Delaney, the woman from Savannah, who died 2 weeks after rewriting her will. I told them about Sarah Collins, the teenage girl who'd been manipulated into giving up her baby. I told them about the dozens of names Danny and I had found people who had no one to speak for them until now. I didn't need to beg anyone to listen, because every room we walked into, someone already knew. Their aunt, their neighbor, their own father. Everywhere we went, someone had a story. Then we went bigger. Rosa helped draft a model law, one that would require greater oversight for wills signed under duress, stricter requirements for transferring power of attorney, and tougher penalties for financial exploitation of the elderly. We brought it to state legislators, many of whom looked surprised, even embarrassed, that they hadn't thought of this sooner. And in one particularly emotional hearing, I stood with baby Robert, now a toddler, with sharp eyes and a stubborn chin, and told the truth again. I was nearly erased because someone thought I was inconvenient, because getting rid of me was easier than facing who I really was. But I survived. And if you let this continue, if you ignore the warning signs, the loopholes, the easy signatures, then next time, it won't be me. It might be your mother, your father, you, and. No one clapped when I finished. But no one looked away. Within months, things began to change. New laws passed in a few states. Financial institutions began flagging strange activity in senior accounts. Free legal clinics opened for older adults needing help understanding their documents. Senior homes invited guest speakers not just to talk about fraud, but about self-worth, memory, and how to trust wisely. Even the media, who once treated my story like a true crime curiosity, started listening differently. It wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a movement. One night, as I sat on the porch with Danny and Rosa, watching Robert play in the yard, I realized how far we'd come. "This won't fix everything," Danny said quietly, No, I agreed. But it's a start. Rosa smiled. You've done more than survive, Eleanor. You've made your life a lighthouse. That word stayed with me. A lighthouse. Something still. Something rooted. Something that doesn't move but helps others find their way. And maybe that's what I was meant to be all along. They say peace comes with time. But sometimes, peace is a door you must choose to open even when your hands are shaking. It had been almost a year since Gavin Lorne was arrested, since we stood before lawmakers and the world and laid bare the quiet war being waged against the elderly. In that time, I'd seen laws change, communities rise up, families reunited, but I hadn't truly stopped, because I knew there was one last thing left undone, and it arrived, as I always knew it would, in the form of a letter. Handwritten, no return address, just my name. Inside, a single sheet of paper. You fought well, but you were never the only survivor. And underneath, a signature that stopped my breath cold. Samantha, my former daughter-in-law, the woman who had once stood beside my son Michael and plotted to erase me from existence, the woman who, for all these years, I believed had disappeared into the wind after the trial. She was alive, and she was watching. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time, unable to speak. When Danny arrived an hour later, I simply handed it to him. He read it once, slowly, then again, faster. This is her handwriting, he said. No doubt. Rosa, who had come by with a fresh draft of our new proposal for national elder protection, looked between us. What does she want? I shook my head. I don't know, but I think she wants me to know she's still in the game. Danny nodded grimly. Or she wants you to quit. Well then, I said, standing slowly. She hasn't been paying attention. It took weeks to trace her. She'd been using aliases, hiding behind proxies, surfacing only long enough to transfer money, change identities, or settle quietly in yet another city. But she made a mistake. A property purchased in upstate New York. Under a new name, yes, but the handwriting on the registration form? Still hers. Danny and I drove up there on a crisp autumn morning. I wasn't nervous. Not exactly. I was. Still. Like the sea before a storm, the house was small, older, set back from the road. No fence, no sign of life. I stepped up to the porch alone, knocked twice. The door opened, and there she was. Older, paler, a touch of gray at her temples, but still Samantha eyes like frost, lips pressed into that same line of calculation. We stared at each other, for what felt like a century. You came, she said, as if we were meeting for tea. You invited me. She stepped aside, and I walked into the final chapter. We sat at a table. No tea, no pretense. Just silence, until she spoke. I didn't write to threaten you, she said. I wrote because you were right. He blinked. She looked down at her hands. Unadorned, unpainted nails. A scar at the base of her thumb I didn't remember. I watched it all unfold, she continued. Your fight, your speeches, the laws. I didn't believe you'd do it. Not really. Not after what they did to you. They? I asked. She smiled bitterly. The system. The machine. The same one I joined because I thought it would keep me safe. Make me powerful. And now? She met my eyes. Now I know power doesn't protect you from guilt. A beat passed. Then two. She reached under the table and slid a folder toward me. Names. Accounts. The rest of the chain. Gavin was a fool. But the ones who funded him? The ones still operating quietly behind trusts and legacy firms? They're bigger than any of us imagined. I didn't touch the folder yet. Instead, I asked, why me? She hesitated. Because I'm tired, she said softly. And because I believe you're the only one who won't use this to get rich. I stared at her, the woman who had nearly helped kill me. And for a moment, I saw not a villain, but a ghost. A shadow of a girl who once just wanted security, then chose the wrong path to get it. Do you regret it? I asked. She didn't answer, but her eyes told me enough. I left with the folder, and I left her there not because I forgave her, but because justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about choosing not to become what hurt you. Back home, I opened the file. Dozens of names. Shell companies. A roadmap to the hidden empire that Gavin Lorne had only ever been a face for. The last document, and the key to finishing what I'd started. As I watched Robert sleep that night, curled beneath a blanket his mother never got to see him grow into, I whispered a promise. We're not done yet. If you're reading this, then I suppose you've come looking for answers. Maybe you heard the stories, the ones they told about the woman who came back from the dead, the grandmother who stood up against a machine no one wanted to see, the widow who refused to be forgotten. Maybe you're not even sure if any of it is real. Let me tell you, it is. Every word, every wound, every whispered threat, and courtroom gasp, and hospital hallway where I stood alone, holding the pieces of a life someone else tried to rewrite. It's all real. But that's not why I'm writing this. I'm writing because someday, someone will try to make you feel small. Someone will tell you you're too old, too tired, too much trouble. They'll hand you forms and speak to you slowly, like your mind no longer matters. They'll dress their greed in concern, their control in kindness. And I want you to remember what I'm about to say. You are not a burden. You are a story still being written. You carry generations in your breath. You hold decades in your hands. And no one, no bank, no lawyer, no child who forgot where they came from gets to decide when your life stops mattering. They tried that with me, tried to push me off a boat, sign my name into silence, take my home, my savings, even the baby who was left at my feet. But I didn't drown, and I didn't disappear. I fought, and because I fought, a law changed in Michigan. A widow in Georgia got her house back. A son in Idaho reunited with the mother they'd placed in a care home too soon. Because I opened my mouth, someone else opened their eyes. That's what truth does. It multiplies. So speak, even if your voice shakes. So remember, even when others would rather forget. And above all, protect each other. If you see a neighbor's lights go off too soon, check in. If a friend's voice starts sounding smaller, ask why. If your own hand starts trembling over a signature you don't understand, pause. Ask again. Say no. You're allowed. You're more than allowed. You're needed. I don't know how much longer I'll be here, but I know this. I didn't survive so others could suffer in silence. I told the truth. Now you do the same. Always. With all the strength left in this heart. Eleanor Whitmore. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the #1 inch the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter a new story is coming, even deeper, even more moving. And I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.